Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, the official variety podcast of doofmedia.com. My name is Scott Daly, and this is my co-host, Matt Breaker Freeman. Hey, Matt, why do they call you Breaker?
Well, it's short for the windbreaker.
Like a fart?
No. That's not what that means. Is it? Wait, is it?
This week on the show, it is time for another one of our patron-produced episodes. For those that don't know, folks that pledge to us at the Doof Warrior level or above on Patreon, that's patreon.com/doofmedia, get to select a movie or a short story for us to do a show on. This week, one of our patrons, Mary F, asked us to take a look at the 1980 Australian film Breaker Morant. And I don't think that one stands for farting. I don't think so.
No, I'm pretty sure it doesn't.
Yeah. So we're going to spend most of the show talking about that film. There will be full spoilers for Breaker Morant. So if you don't want to be spoiled, maybe go listen to the movie, watch the movie. Don't listen to a movie. Watch movies. Movies are for watching. Podcasts are for listening.
Hold on. Let me write that down. All right, good.
Then after that, the results from last week's Council of Doof voting are in, and they might surprise you. Or maybe not.
Oh, okay.
Also, Matt, there's news in the world of the Snyder cut of Justice League, and we're going to talk about it.
I'm so excited about that.
It's going to be a fun show. We got it pretty packed, so let's jive. Let's jive right in to our first section and talk all about the 1980 film Breaker Morant.
South Africa, 1901. The British Crown sent an army to fight by the book against Dutch farmers who fought back any way they could.
It's a new kind of war, George. It's a new war for a new century.
Lord Kitchener himself recognized the unorthodox nature of this warfare when he formed a special squad to deal with it.
They were soldiers, trapped between shifting codes of honor.
New orders from Kitchener. No prisoners. The gentleman's war is over.
It's wrong, mate. You know it is.
I just follow orders.
Matt, what is Breaker Morant about?
3 Australian lieutenants are court-martialed for executing prisoners as a way of deflecting attention from war crimes committed by their superior officers.
Breaker Morant was written by Jonathan Hardy, David Stevens, and Bruce Beresford, with Harold Lander as story editor. It was adapted from a play of the same name by Kenneth G. Ross, and it was directed by Bruce Beresford, who also directed the film Driving Miss Daisy, you might know.
Yeah.
This is... Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and of course, it's based on true events.
Yes, correct. In the Second Boer War, back in, I believe, 1908, right?
Yeah.
This is an Australian film. It was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Foreign Film. It was also nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay. It did not win, but it did win a bunch of, this was huge in Australia. This won the best film of the year and all the Australian awards. So this was definitely Australia making a mark on the film scenery with this. I think it was nominated for, or at least Beresford was nominated for the Palme d'Or at Cannes that year. This was a big film, and it's a complicated film, Matt. I think that's one of the first things I want to talk to you about. I guess first, what were your overall impressions? Had you seen this film before? Was this new to you? And what did you think of it?
No, I'd never seen it before. I was, we've talked about wanting to see foreign films, and it was pretty cool getting to see an Australian film. Mm-hmm. No, I'd never seen it. I was vaguely familiar with sort of the sketch of what it was about, and I enjoyed it a lot. It's very cool because it's from a storytelling point of view, it's basically like a courtroom drama mixed in with almost like one of these mutiny films. Not that there's a mutiny necessarily, but it's like. It's got a bunch of it reminds you a lot of is it A Few Good Men? Yeah, it's A Few Good Men, right? Yeah. But I mean, just generally, right? But yeah, I love the intensity of it. You're really into it. I was actually surprised. I was expecting it when I heard 1980s Australian film. I'm like, okay, it's probably going to be boring. I'm probably going to have to watch it as okay, this is an old movie. I'm going to have to kind of tolerate certain things. But no, it really kind of riveted me. How did you like it?
Yeah, I agree with you. I had never seen this film before either. I think I'm with you where I knew very, very vaguely I don't think I've ever heard the name Breaker Morant before, but I knew about the Boer Wars. And I think, I mean, this is like historically, this is one of the first big, at least in the British Empire, one of the first big like war crimes trials, right? This is really one of the first time where they called their own people up on committing war crimes against an enemy and charged them for it. And of course, I have so many complicated things to say about that, but. I mean, it was one of those movies where it did not surprise me when I learned that this was based on a play, because you're right. It's this is first and foremost a courtroom drama in which it's mostly characters just sitting around talking and arguing, and most of the conflict and the events and the tension is driven by dialogue and not much else. But they do, I think one of the things I love most about this is the way in which Beresford has taken a play and really made a movie out of it. And we've talked about this with some of the other movies we've done that are based on plays, but I think this is a beautifully shot movie. And I think he does a lot of clever things with direction and where he's putting the camera and how he shows and blocking and like the direction of characters and how they move and how they walk that really, sells you on a lot of these characters. I thought it was brilliant. And it's complicated. It's a thing that makes you think. There's no easy answer in this movie.
Yeah, the camera placement, especially during, courtroom scenes, can be stale, right? Yeah. But the way it's filmed is extremely engaging. Mm-hmm. I agree completely with that. There's a lot of these beautiful, beautiful vistas of. I'm actually looking it up right now because I wasn't sure whether it was filmed in
South Africa.
In South Africa, it was filmed in South Africa.
I don't know.
Yeah, I was checking because I was like, well, maybe they could have really filmed it anywhere. But in either case, it's just like a lot of shots of like people standing on a hill, and then the camera is actually maybe like above them, looking kind of down across this amazing landscape. Mm-hmm. And it really sweeps you up into the era. Like, yeah, it was made in 1980, but you almost feel like this is like 100-year-old movie just because of it just really captures. Obviously the costuming is great, and the everybody's always sweaty. it's like you kind of like you really get the feeling of like, I guess this must have been what it was like to be there back then.
Yeah, totally. So I guess this is one of those movies where I feel like we have to do a little bit more work kind of explaining the situation around it, because I think it is very possible that most of the people listening to this episode have not seen the movie. So sure. I guess the conceit of this film, beyond the just quick IMDb title that Matt read, is these three men are lieutenants. They are Australian. This is right after Australia became a Commonwealth, right? This is right after their independence, relative independence. So they are still technically part of the British Army, but not a little bit. It's a little confusing, and I think that fact becomes pretty important in the movie.
Yeah, it's this weird kind of peripheral, like, yeah, you're part of the Australian Corps, but you're still definitely in command of the British, or under the command of the British. But like, there's this interesting sort of deniability where they can treat the Australian soldiers worse, and so there's like a subtle kind of, I don't know if racism is the right word exactly, but there's definitely a classism where the Australian troops are treated as like disposable and lesser, and they're all trying, many of them are trying to like climb the social ladder, but they have this huge disadvantage because they're Australian. I think isn't Breaker Morant, the main character, is English though, isn't he?
I didn't think so.
Am I wrong?
Yeah,
I might be.
I thought they were all Australian.
I think he was just upper class. He was upper class Australian, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely true.
I feel like I missed a major detail because I know that he was upper class. I was just wondering if maybe he was actually of British birth. But anyway, that's a relatively minor detail. I think the point is that they all kind of have a chip on their shoulder about this, and it's one of the sources of conflict in the film.
Mm-hmm. I looked it up, and he's Anglo-Australian, which basically means he is Australian, but his ancestry mostly originates in England. So, I don't know what that means.
Which I mean, I think that might speak to why I was confused. Sure. Is like it's all these distinctions that we don't even really understand due to where we're sitting historically. But super important to these people, these characters.
So the events of this war is basically a war between the British Empire and the Boers, who were mostly like Dutch, like settlers. Like they're
in
not
South Africa.
Yeah. They're not native to South Africa, but they're not really part of like they're not like they're separate, right? Like they started their own free state. This is a lot of history stuff that I'm not as caught up on, but this was not like a war between two European countries in South Africa. This was like an independent group of former Dutch people that declared an independent state in South Africa and fighting against the massive, at the time, British Empire.
Yeah, my understanding is that they colonized South Africa like starting in like the 1650s.
Right.
So they'd been there for a while. They were not relatively speaking, I guess.
Yeah.
And then the British, they wanted this area, and it's interesting because basically, I don't want to skip ahead of your narrative here, but it pretty quickly seems to have turned into a guerrilla war.
Sure.
I actually learned something from the movie, which is that the word commando apparently is like a Dutch word that came into use because of the Boer commandos doing like, living off the land and doing hit and run attacks. I don't know if that's true. That's what the movie says.
Sure. I think that's probably true. But yeah, I mean, I've got the Second Boer War pulled up on Wikipedia. As I was fumbling my way through history, I pulled it up. But yeah, this was two independent Boer states, the South African Republic and the Orange Free State, who were both conquered by the British. By the way, the British won this war. If you didn't know, they won it. They won it eventually. And both of these countries collapsed and joined the British Empire. So yay! But basically, what happens here is because of these Boer commandos that are doing this guerrilla warfare thing, the British troops were getting pretty annoyed and pissed off, and there's all this kind of handing down through the ranks about how we're not going to take prisoners anymore. That wonderful line in the movie, a gentleman's war is over. And so they start just killing people. They start just totally killing people. And our character, Harry Breaker Morant, is a lieutenant in this army, and his captain, I don't know ranks, his captain Taylor is killed by the Boers, and not just killed, like brutalized, right? Like they shoot him twice, but then they like stab him a bunch of times, and so he's furious, and he decides he's going to start just killing any Boer he sees. He's going to kill. So he shoots unarmed prisoners, and they charge him for it. The British Empire court-martials him and charges him for war crimes. Spoilers: they charge him and convict him and sentence him to death, and both Harry Morant and was it Hancock was the other guy?
Don't remember.
I get the names confused. I think yes, it was because it was Brian Brown playing Peter Hancock. They're both executed. And so this is really a movie really just diving into these ideas of one, following orders. What does that mean? What does it mean to follow orders? Like, this is 40 odd year, like almost 50 years before Nuremberg, right? Before we as a society, a global society, basically decided that the I was just following orders defense is bullshit, that you can't do that. When it comes to atrocious acts, that is not a fair defense. Right. But we're kind of having that same discussion here in 1902, I think it was.
I mean, It's very interesting to me because I was inclined, I have a certain perspective on this whole thing, but then I had to be reminded, like, this was back in the day when you would just be shot for not following orders. Like in World War I, like if you were completely like mentally shattered by PTSD, they would just shoot you.
Yep.
Like that. And it was kind of a different time. Right. And so it's like, well, so yeah, like you were saying though, there were apparently, and that's kind of part of the interesting part of the film is like there's some ambiguity as to what were the orders.
Right.
Because like in one telling, the orders are like shoot any Boers that you find that are wearing the khaki colors of the British military. And the reason is like, this is our way of dealing with them wearing our colors and sneaking around. And so just if they're wearing British khaki, if they're wearing British colors, just you're entitled to execute them because they're breaking the rules of war. So you can execute them summarily. But that kind of got turned into like maybe by word of mouth, maybe by like the game of telephone, like you should just execute any Boer prisoners because we don't have the capacity to really take prisoners. And because this is a guerrilla war, like the whole concept of gentlemanliness and having prisoners doesn't make sense. So just execute all the prisoners that you find.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And I mean, I think, the movie is it's very interesting to me because on the one hand, the movie makes it very clear that the British Empire is using these men as fall guys for this stuff, that the war against the Boers is not going well and they want to kind of sue for peace or come to an agreement. The British still win in the end, but they want to come to an agreement. They want both sides to be able to come together in some way. And it's very difficult to do that when you've either explicitly or implicitly told all your men to kill every Boer person you see, no matter what, even if they are showing the white flag, even if they are surrendering, even if they are captured and prisoners of war, murder them. So the movie paints this as we're letting these Australian, not a true Brit, not part of the Britain, but just an Australian, like a wide kind of uncontrollable animal type person, take the fall for the Empire and do something that we need to get done to make us look a little better with our enemy. So when it comes time to sue for peace, we can negotiate with them better. It makes that very clear. And I think that is definitely the movie's, or at least part of the movie's perspective on this whole thing, that's terrible and awful and fucked up and evil in a lot of ways. However, the other half of this thing is that Harry Morant and Hancock are kind of awful people too. Like this is not just like, oh, I really don't want to shoot these people, but I have to follow my order because I'm afraid of being shot. They enjoyed it. I mean, the movie is very explicit that Morant didn't start doing this until his friend and captain was murdered and like brutalized by these people. So he's doing this for revenge. He's doing this because he wants to take it out on these people. And that wonderful moment where they reveal that the missionary, they're charged for killing this missionary, and they vehemently denied they killed this missionary. He rode off, and yeah, Hancock rode off too, but he didn't go that way. He went somewhere else. And then it's revealed, no, actually, he did kill him because they thought he could be a spy. And so we're going to kill this missionary. That's awful. It's awful. Yeah. And like they're hiding behind the just following orders defense, right? Like it might be true, but they took pleasure in doing these atrocities to these people. And that is, I think, where this weird gray area where this movie sits. And it makes me kind of it's difficult for me to like come to a place where I'm like, I'm on a side in this movie, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's like, it's very clear to me that like shooting the missionary is just like evil and unconscionable. But at the same time, that's the sort of thing where you're like, if you're out in the wilds, the hills of South Africa, and there's guerrilla fighters crawling all over the place, maybe wearing, the colors of your own side and killing your people. And then here's this missionary who is one of them in your heart, and you know that all he's going to do is he's going to give away your position, and like I can at least empathize with the characters making that choice, even though sitting in my comfortable podcasting office, I'm like, obviously it's immoral to just like murder someone in cold blood because you suspect they might be a spy, but like the realities of that time were so harsh that it's almost impossible for us to relate to it. And I think that's maybe one of the interesting things the movie did to me, is it took me from a position of being just like staunchly, this kind of behavior is not acceptable, and to the place of being like, well, I mean, at least I can empathize with somebody making that decision in that position.
Right. Like the movie takes the time to show us that the missionary like goes and talks to the Boers, even though he was explicitly told not to. Right. Like they specifically said do not. And so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of laying the seed of doubt here. Was he getting information that he could then pass on? Was he relaying messages? And we never get to learn that, like we never get to know the truth of that. And I think that's part of it. That's part of, and I think like this is one of the most anti-war movies I've ever seen. Like I think the overall conclusion on this movie is look what war does to us. Look what war does to people. We have this person named Breaker Morant who he's called a breaker because he broke horses. Like he's a horse rancher. That's what he did. He trained horses, and you take this guy and you pluck him into this other country that he doesn't belong, that arguably none of these people belong. Not even the Boers really belong here. They just settled it long before the British were trying to. But you take this person and you pluck him in here for the glory of the empire, and you tell him to go shoot those people, and then you start drawing arbitrary distinctions of when it is and is not okay to shoot those people. Because like, it's never like this whole thing is ridiculous. Like these are farmers that have settled this place, and you're driving yourself onto their land to advance the British Empire, and then being told shoot them now. It's okay to engage them now, but then not this time. Even though like it's just the whole thing is absurd. The whole thing is ridiculous, and it's just like this is what war does. This is what war is. It's this absurdity where we tell a person that signed up for this because they were broke and needed money and needed to like take care of their wife and children. I think, isn't it Hancock that says like, there's a depression going on and I have a wife and child to feed, and that's why I've signed up for this. That's why I'm here. Because the British promised me money. And it's like, so take that guy, put a gun in his hand and said, shoot those people, but only at the appropriate time. And it's just right. Absurd. The whole thing. Yeah. The whole thing.
They're all very disaffected about it, right? They're all like kind of explicitly. It's interesting because you think of that as being a more modern phenomenon of people being like, this is a bullshit war,
right?
But like these guys all know, like we're Australian. What are we doing in South Africa?
Right, yeah.
And yeah, it was also interesting because the one of the three, the younger officer, George Whitten, in real life went on to write this book actually called I just had it pulled up, Scapegoats of the Empire, where it's interesting. It's like this this argument, for public consumption about how unfair this was, and how you've got to assume, in fact not assume, this it says right here, the reprinting, oh no, sorry, I got it backwards. But anyway, the story, like the reason this turned into a play and then turned into a movie is obviously because this guy wrote this book and this story was out there. And
sure.
In point of fact, the actual story of what happened historically was a bit more complicated than what the movie does.
Of course,
there were more people who were court-martialed, and I do think that the two people in the movie were the only people who were executed. I think they just wanted to simplify the storytelling. Well, boil it down.
And one of the things I love about this movie is how these three characters simplify that storytelling down, because they each represent a clear thing, right? We have our protagonist, Breaker Morant, who is this like kind of grizzled. He's older, he's tired, but he's a good soldier relatively, right? Then we have Lieutenant Hancock, who is like the brash, like misbehavior, right? Like he just doesn't ever listen. He's always mouthing off. He's always doing what he wants. He's like riding off and having these affairs with some of the women, despite the fact that they're married. And then we have Whitten, the youngest one, who is like the ride or die for the Empire person, the person that like maybe prior to the war was convinced of the supremacy of the British Empire, like totally like was bought into the patriotism of this whole thing. And we've placed all of them in this situation, and then we get to see how each one of these people with different personalities reacts to this whole thing.
I like that. I mean, I doubt that those men had those characteristics in real life.
No.
but they really emphasize it. You know, they have the one guy, the brash guy. He's always yelling in the trial and calling out the witnesses in a way where you're almost like, I don't know if you would have ever really done that in real life, but okay. Yeah.
One of the things I love that this movie did, and that I think Beresford does such a good job on, is the way the blocking supports these ideas. Like the moment that really stuck out to me is when all three of these men are march into the court, right? And the first time they're in the courtroom and they march in, and first of all, we have to say that these turn of the century British uniforms are kind of ridiculous. Like they just look silly. Like especially the safari looking caps. At least the Australian soldiers have the cool trilby with the side turned up. But they all have these really tight chin straps, like ridiculously, like absurdly tight. Like I don't understand why this was ever in fashion. I don't get it. I don't get it at all. It's awful. But they're all just very tight and very, very straight-laced and very formal. And these three men walk in, and Breaker Morant comes first, and he hits his points like pretty sharp. Like he walks in, and they do like the march to present yourself to the court, and then like the sharp turn, and then the walk to the defendant's desk, and then the sit down. And then Hancock walks in, and he does the same thing, but it's so less sharp, right? It's soft, like it's less caring, like he still is at attention, but it's like minimal effort. His turns to turn and then walk into the chair, it's like, like it's a perfect representation of his character. And then Witten comes in last, and his are probably the most formal, the most sharpest, the most British looking out of all of them, because he is the one of these three Australians that has bought into the bullshit more than any of them. And that's that's all visual. Like that's all just right there, without any language spoken, without anything else. You kind of have these three characters defined, and I thought that was just excellent.
Yeah. No, I adore that. You're reminding me of another thing that I really liked, which is I guess you could call it the world building. Like we kind of mentioned before, how you really feel pulled into the setting. I just said, it feels like the movie is much older than it is, and I think a lot of it is like these little affectations where clearly, like in a modern military setting, people don't really move that way anymore. Like, there's still formality and they're still standing at attention, but like think about like so the people who basically take them to and from their jail cells are clearly like some sort of Scottish regiment,
right? Because
they're wearing kilts. They have this very exaggerated way of marching where they like swing their arms, and it's very consistent. And it's like you're seeing. I love that touch, right? Because the movie didn't have to do that, right? The movie could have just been like, whatever, it's British versus Australian. We'll just have them be British, British jailers. But it's like, no, it goes out of their way to be like, actually, we're showing that like the British Empire is this interesting amalgam of all these different like cores of the different. The different British, I don't know what the word is for what is Scotland with respect to Britain, but the different pieces of Great Britain,
sure,
or the different pieces of the empire, I should say. I really don't know the right words for this, but the point is, that, and like the salute is just slightly off, right? The salute is almost, it's like it's turned out, the hand is turned out in a way where it almost reminds you of the German salute of a few years later.
Sure.
And I was just like, like all these little details of like costuming and choices where it's like it doesn't really matter, but it really pulls you in. It's almost like you're watching like a fantasy film or something where
right.
It's doing all these detailed things to sweep you up into the feeling of this setting. I love that.
And I think the way in which the movie depicts the Boers is like by design in contrast to that. Like everything about the British soldier is tight, is like controlled, is formal to almost a level of absurdity, like almost like a ridiculous amount. And then the Boers are these people who look ragged and poor. They've all, like every single one of them has a beard. To basically every British person either is clean shaven or with like a goofy looking mustache.
Yeah, a really elaborate mustache.
Yeah, with the sides all like all tweezed out to sharp points. Like the movie is creating this contrast. Like we're meant to see this, like this the difference in these people. And the thing is, like, I think traditionally one would look at the British side and see like, oh yes, this is civilized, and then look at the Boer side and say this is farmer, this is country, this is uncivilized. But the interesting thing about it is, I think with the way the movie kind of shows the horror hidden behind the formality, it actually makes, just like I think with the salute that you said reminds you of a Nazi salute a little bit. It reveals kind of the horror and the monstrosity behind the formality, that like this is just like the trappings of civilization to hide just monstrous actions that are being taken, strategic actions that are being taken that are just freely giving up people's lives because it's better for the long-term success of the empire. And it's really interesting the way that it makes you feel that way, not just through the events of the movie, but through that costuming, through the direction, through how characters move and where they're placed, and the silliness of it all.
Yeah. It's interesting because we've been talking about sort of the story of the movie, but like most of the drama, like most of the stuff that actually makes you feel stuff, I would say is in the courtroom scenes. Like in particular, the times when, their lawyer, who we haven't really talked about at all, but who's this kind of great epic, lawyer character.
He's an Atticus Finch of Australia.
Yeah, he's very passionate about defending these men, even though he's like extremely unqualified. So he's having to be creative and make like wild gambits and do crazy things like subpoena like the head of the British military, basically. And then of course the I don't know if it's the judge or what exactly, but the guy who's adjudicating the trial is like constantly shutting him down and ignoring his objections. And
well, the perspective of the movie is that this is a sham trial, right? That they created this to. This is the reason why Major Thomas has been assigned the case, is because he's not very experienced, because they think he will either bumble it or not be able to mount a defense, that the evidence is overwhelming, that this is going to be an easy thing they're just going to get through, and that is not really what ends up happening.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's the clever thing the movie does, is the movie like through the lawyer's choices of how to frame things sort of brings you around as the viewer to see it as like, all right, yeah, these people actually did do this terrible thing. Like that even the lawyer says, like, at no point have we denied that Morant had the prisoners shot. What we're saying is the orders were to shoot prisoners, and so if you're going, you can't hold him accused of murder. You can't accuse a soldier of murder. And I mean, he has a specific thing toward the end where he's like, even if you give soldiers unclear orders about what is permissible and what's not, and then they go on to do something heinous, it's still your fault. Just not because you ordered murder, but or not because you gave that order, but if you just giving people unclear orders in a life or death situation, they're going to interpret those orders in a way that is protective of themselves, and you shouldn't blame them for that. You should look yourself in the mirror and correct whatever it is about your institution that led to that happening.
Right. But that's not what they're doing at all. They're just punishing these people for the things they did. Yeah. And I mean, one of the most interesting things about Thomas to me is that the movie does not allow him to know the full extent of what these people did, right? Because the one thing they keep from him is the murder of the missionary. They do not tell their lawyer that, yes, they did kill that guy. So he's arguing for these people, in a certain way, believing that they're better than they are. But I don't think that makes anything he says untrue. Like, I love his final speech in the like his basic closing remarks of the courtroom scene is like wonderful. Like, I have it right here. The fact of the matter is that war changes men's nature. The barbarities of war are seldom committed by abnormal men. The tragedy of war is that these horrors are committed by normal men in abnormal situations in which the ebb and flow of everyday life have departed and have been replaced by a constant round of fear and anger, blood and death. And so, like, I almost think it doesn't matter that he's like he's not aware of the full list of the atrocities that they actually did commit, because his point is always what you said. It's not that we're not denying that they did it. Yes, they killed those people. No one's denying that. The point is they did it because of what was done to them. That this is what war does to people, and then to just suddenly say randomly, well, you deserve to die for that. That you deserve to be convicted and shot to death because of this thing. And it's more complicated than that. It's just so it's so infuriating. Like this movie made me mad because like it's just absurd. It's just absurd that we would do this. That we would send these people and then let them kill people, and then suddenly be like, oh no, you did that wrong. You did the killing wrong. Which of course they did. Like, killing unarmed people is barbaric and terrible and horrifying. But like they're most of those people were farmers anyway. It just so happens that it's a farmer with a gun in his hand that's pointing it at you because you're trying to walk on his land. Like it's just Matt, this movie makes me mad.
Yeah. Well, the whole movie I kept thinking about this one episode of the Jocko podcast where he talks about I think it's pronounced My Lai massacre, which was a horrible thing perpetrated by American troops in the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And that like this single podcast episode really kind of influenced me a lot in this line of thinking, because, you know, Jocko, he's this retired Navy SEAL commander. He knows this stuff. He knows it viscerally. He's seen this stuff, right? And he's like, his attitude is like, this was absolutely horrible, and this cannot ever be allowed to happen again. Like, but it's not like he's making any excuses for the men who did these things. I think he condemns because what they did at this massacre in Vietnam is like way more horrifying than executing prisoners. It was like executing like just like a village full of obviously innocent and unarmed people who had nothing to do with anything. But the point is, he I think tended to focus more on the institutional failure of it, like the fact, like, how do you get to the point where your soldiers are so lost and lacking in like a sense of what the correct action is, that they would find themselves doing this in this situation. Like how many failures of leadership are necessary to get soldiers to the point where this seems like the thing that they should be doing, even to the point of like the leaders of the company basically leading the massacre, you know? And you know, that was just an aside. That was an interesting thing, because one of the helicopter pilots, who was kind of able to be detached from the situation, was like doing everything he could to stop it, and, you know, like flying his helicopter down, landing it in the field between American troops and villagers, and like literally putting himself between them and being like, go the other way, and like trying to like rescue individual Vietnamese. And it's incredibly dramatic and horrifying and upsetting thing, actually. But I guess the reason I'm mentioning all of this is to say, like, like I don't think we need to forgive or you know, minimize the horrible things that people do in war sometimes, but definitely this idea that, like, clearly in this movie they make this very solid point, like, yeah, you gave these orders. Maybe you didn't specifically say shoot all prisoners, but the orders you gave were like vague enough, and you did the extra step of sort of giving it to this Australian Corps, where you could then have plausible deniability by just saying like, yeah, just solve the problem. We don't care what you have to do. Just solve the problem. It was clearly bad leadership and clearly led to the situation. So.
Yeah. I mean, Thomas gives an argument here. It says, before I was asked to defend these soldiers, I spent some months destroying Boer farmhouses, burning their crops, herding their women and children into stinking refugee camps where thousands of them have already died from diseases. Now, those orders were issued, sir, and soldiers like myself and these men here have to carry them out, however damn reluctantly. And so it's like, yeah, I mean, there's a failure in leadership all over the place, and yet, who are the people at the end of the day sitting in the chairs on the edge of this clearing getting shot at? It's the two lieutenants. It's not the leadership. It's not the people that caused this to happen. It's not the people that entered this war. It's not the people that decided, yes, let's go to war with these people for the good of our empire. It's the people that, yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Like, this is not a mutually exclusive thing. We can say that Breaker Morant like did horrible things, had no real good excuse to do them, and should be punished for them. But to lay the buck there, like to stop it at that point, just be like, yep, we did it. We're good now. Let's move on with the war, is absurd. It's totally absurd.
Yeah. Definitely, though, the movie like pushed and pulled me around a bit in terms of because of it's a good movie. It's worth watching because it puts you in a certain place where you're actually ready to be like fairly sympathetic with the the Australian trio who are on trial, and then they get to the they even convince you like, yeah, and they didn't kill the missionary because he went off and anything could have happened. And then they like cut, like basically like smash cut from that to the guy being like, yeah, I killed him.
Yeah, and I love when what's his name doesn't even know, the youngest soldier doesn't even know about it, and he's like, I wonder who did kill that missionary. And Hancock is like, me.
Yeah. I reckon I did. Yeah.
And then it's just like, oh fuck, okay. So you were just totally lying. Okay, well, shit. How do I feel about this now? And yeah, I mean, I think that's the strength of this movie, that's where it leaves you, and that's where it wants you. Like, it doesn't want you to walk out of this movie saying what happened to Breaker Morant was a tragedy. He was perfect. He never did anything wrong. You're supposed to feel scummy about the whole situation. Everything in this sucks. Everything. I loved it. I loved it. Like I did not know what to expect. I did not know what I was walking into, and to have like a movie that basically like examines the concept of war crimes, of what behavior is acceptable and isn't, through the lens of the British gentleman of the turn of the century, right? I mean, that's the thing that I can't get over, is just how much the movie plays up like the extravagance of the British Army. I think when we see, I forget the name of his the commander of the army. I forget his name.
There's a guy Kitchener, but I don't know if Kitchener is the guy who's the commander of the army.
Yeah. But his house, his residence is the most absurd, gaudy thing you've ever seen, right? It's just ridiculous. And whenever, like, when the lawyer for the prosecution goes and visits him, he's like wearing his proper outfit, and he's got the cane like tucked under his arm, and is like walking into this incredibly gaudy room that the commander is staying in. And it's just like, this is all intentional, right? This is all painting a picture. These are who these people are. This is like this gentleman's agreement, and then under their breaths, they're signing the death warrants of these people for doing the things that they wanted them to do anyway. And it's like the contrast, the contradiction there, the absurdity, the hypocrisy of it all. It's just it's perfect in doing what it wants to do. It upsets you, it angers you, it challenges you. It's really wonderful. I loved this movie.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I see why it was so praised, and I'm glad we get to watch a foreign film. My understanding is this was like at the beginning of the Australia craze in America. Where Mel Gibson came of this era.
Sure.
In a sense. So yeah, it's fun. I liked it a lot. I'm glad I watched it.
Yeah, I did too. I just want like there's just some random direction stuff I really liked. The director uses like slow pull-ins very dramatically, and this is like a style of the 70s, right? The 70s really liked this kind of very slow move in on going from a wide to a close-up without cutting, by just slowly pushing pushing in towards the actor. And this movie does that several times to really drive in a scene. Like when a character is giving a speech, oftentimes it'll start at this wide shot, and then as his speech is like reaching its crescendo, it'll get to where it's a close up on his face. And I think those are really cool. Like that's a really cool technique, and it's kind of fallen out of vogue a little bit. It's not a camera technique that's used as much anymore, but like, man, you go watch films from the 70s and early 80s, like they all do this. It's like, it was like super popular. And I thought it really worked in this movie.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting because normally I find that exact technique extremely distracting and annoying.
Interesting.
But in this movie, I did notice it, but I was like, oh, this works here for some reason. I don't know.
Can you think of a reason for why?
Yeah.
Why it's so distracting?
Yeah. It's because I'm always notice that they're doing that, and then I'm reminded that I'm watching a movie. Like there's other cuts. You're just like, yeah. I mean, I'm just watching. This is what's happening, you know. Mm-hmm. But that particular cut, like you see, it brings something about the fact that you're watching a film that was captured by a camera, because what you're seeing is the camera moving slowly through space, and your attention is drawn to the camera. That's what I'm pretty sure that's what it is to me. Like, just it always reminds me, oh, I'm watching a movie.
I get that. It's calling attention to itself in a very specific way. Yeah, this is like a lot of times we try to use camera movements to sort of echo how we perceive things. And this is not like, very rarely are we listening to someone speak and we're slowly walking towards them, slowly, like deliberately walking towards them in that kind of manner. I get that. It's definitely a shot that is saying, look at me.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of different types of shots that are, you know, mannered in some way where I think, I don't know why it is specifically that I'm annoyed with this one. I guess it's just that I always notice it rather than just being kind of swept up in the movie. But yeah, cool. In this movie, I think it was done maybe even slower than usual. I can't substantiate that, but like it felt like it. And whatever it was, it worked better for me in this movie.
Cool. All right. I love that. I think the death scene where they're executed was one of the most powerful scenes in the movie to me. Just the way it's shot, like it's this beautiful sunset, and one of the ways in which the camera is set up, like as the two of them are walking out to the chairs, the camera is placed in such a way that you can't see the firing squad yet. So they're brought out to these chairs, and it looks like they're just alone in the middle of this meadow with the sun setting behind them. And it's just peaceful and serene. And then it cuts to another angle, and we see the men lined up with guns. And then like, it's so slow and deliberate, right? Like the movie takes the time. We see the bullets handed out to each one of the members of the firing squad. Like we see each and every one of them take a bullet, put it in their gun, and load it into the chamber. And then like, it's so slow. Like it's drawing out this moment. Like it wants us to feel this. This is the end. This is what happens. This is the result of this charade, is that these two people are just going to be killed. And then everyone's going to move on as if no one else has done anything wrong. It's like, really emphasizing the guns seem to be pointed at the wrong people in this regard.
And then the scene goes on beyond that, right? Like you almost wonder as you're watching it, you're like, I guess they're going to shoot them and the movie's over. And it's like, no, they show these dead bodies being lifted up, you know, like sacks of meat and dropped into the coffins.
Yeah. One of which doesn't fit because they didn't measure him.
Which is like great like dark humor where earlier he joked like, you know, he basically says, I wish they'd measured us first. And then you see that he's obviously too tall for the coffin. And it's like, okay, that's darkly funny and also just like the perfect end cap for this character.
Yeah, it's so utterly indifferent. I mean, the scene, it looked like a crane shot where we're seeing inside the prison that they're staying, and we're seeing the coffins being built just on the other side of the wall of the prison. Yeah. I think that's a powerful scene too, because it's just like, it's just like, this is, they're building your coffin. They're building and they're just so indifferent to the fact that you're standing right there and have to just live next to the place where your coffin is for the final night of your life.
Yeah.
It's so powerful.
Yeah. You know, one sequence I loved was when they hand out the verdicts, because the characters have all sort of been given different ones of them have different levels of hope, and they take them into the room, and the guy's just like, you know, guilty, you'll be executed at dawn. And they're like, yes, sir. And then they,
he's so indifferent, right? The way he says that, he's so indifferent to it. He doesn't care. Like, it's not like to the first kid, he says, you've been found guilty and will be sentenced to death. And then he waits like an annoying amount of time, and then is like, but we've decided to commute your sentence and you will just spend the rest of your life in prison. And like, he says that with the same tone that he says to Breaker Morant, which is, we're going to kill you. You're going to die tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it's just, there's this kind of smug British satisfaction to it. Not to the point, like, it's just running right up against the line, right? Like, where you couldn't actually accuse him of being smug, but he's kind of being smug. And it's just like, I hated that guy, the lawyer, not the lawyer, the
judge, I guess.
The judge, yeah. I'm not sure what it would be called. I don't know military tribunal rules at all, but
I agree. Yeah, but that was, you know, because so many of these, I would say the disproportionate majority of like lawyer movies end with some kind of triumphant feeling. But this one, you know, other than the kid gets to live and go to penal colony for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
You know, it's definitely a downer ending.
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, just like as they load these two bodies into the coffins, the question that I found myself thinking is, what was accomplished here? What was done? Like, what was made better? What was made okay? What was made right by this action? Is there justice for the Boers now? No. Did we teach a lesson to our soldiers to when is appropriate? What is the appropriate behavior to have? No, they didn't. Like, this was nothing. This was absolutely nothing. It was a political move for a political cause. And that's it. And it's just like, wow, what are we doing? What are we doing, right? Humans?
Yeah. I mean, in the end, the only positive thing that came out of it is like, okay, well, at least this guy then wrote a book that went on to sort of influence our thinking about, you know, military accountability and atrocities, and how the just following orders defense should be, you know, thought about potentially.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. All right. So that is Breaker Morant. It's available for rent on Amazon. If you listen to us talk about it and really want to see it now yourself, strongly recommend it. Really do.
Yeah, definitely.
We didn't talk about the Rule 303 moment, but that's actually become famous. Like, what rule did you execute them on? Rule 303, which is the caliber of or the name of the rifle that he had.
Yeah. Which I don't know. Did that start in this movie? Is that
it did? Yeah.
Yeah, because that's I when that scene came around, I was like, I feel like I've seen this somewhere, but yeah, no, I definitely didn't know it came from this.
I actually don't know if it started in this movie or literally Breaker Morant and other Australian soldiers like came up with that. Like, I think that might be it.
That might be. Yeah. It's an interesting question.
Sure.
But yeah, it's definitely has to do with that rifle for sure.
Yes,
so.
Definitely.
Doof.
All right, Matt, let's talk about Spider-Verse.
Okay.
So for those that don't know or didn't listen to last week's episode or what have you, each month we have our council of patrons put up a movie for us to talk about, and then we open it up to everyone to vote on whether the movie is good enough to be entered into our canon of the best films ever. We only have one movie in there so far right now, and that is Primer, the time travel film by Shane Carruth that Matt and I both absolutely loved. And it's time to talk about our next applicant, which was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So, Matt, we both voted yes, right? You and I were both pretty firm yeses in this.
We were.
And so was the audience, Matt. With 96% of the vote, Spider-Verse is entered into the Doof canon. So we've got 2 on our list now. I think this deserves to be there. Probably one of the best animated films I've ever seen. I really enjoyed it. And most people seem to agree with a lot of the things we said. We did get one person who was brave enough to say why they voted no. And they enjoyed it, but they just didn't think it was a great movie. They had trouble with how silly it was at times. Like Spider-Ham was just almost too silly and kind of tone breaking for them to where it like kind of like hopped between childish and serious in ways that weren't that satisfying to them. And I get that. Like Spider-Ham is definitely not my favorite part of the movie by far.
Yeah, I think I can see that. I mean, it reminds me of how some people find like Thor Ragnarok to be kind of tiresome in its humor, and it just works on me. And I'm like, I don't really have any defense for it other than like, I guess some things just push people's butt. It's kind of like that camera shot that we were just talking about, where like I can't really tell you why that bothers me and other camera shots don't, because all camera shots in theory could draw your attention to the fact that you're watching a movie. So, you know, different humorous elements might just hit people differently. So I totally get that.
Yeah, totally.
And I even think, I even kind of do believe that when you go to that level of humor, there is just, you're always running a risk that you are kind of burning up the dramatic investment that your viewer has. I don't know. It's interesting to consider, like, what would that movie be like if they just kind of skipped the Spider-Ham thing, you know? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tough thing to do. And the weird thing about humor is it's probably one of the most subjective things ever when we're talking about storytelling and entertainment, right? Because it's just like, I mean, we all like different things in stories, but I think nothing turns people off more than a certain type of humor that they don't like. Right. Like, I think that's when I talk to people that do not like the MCU, they don't like most of the movies in the MCU. The most common refrain is, I just find that the humor takes away from any kind of dramatic stakes narrative they're trying to make. They always undercut stuff with humor. And like, the humor to me is part of the fun. It makes me laugh. And I never like, I have never in watching any of these movies thought that any other moment lost meaning because the moment before it was absurd. Like, I've just never had that feeling, but I totally get why people have. Like, I totally get that. And it's just one of those things that's very, very subjective. And you can just kind of be like, yeah, I get what you mean. I even think you have a good point. I just don't feel that way.
Yeah.
And that's like, at the end of the day, we just gotta be like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And in any case, it seemed to work for most people because it won in a massive landslide.
Yes.
And
that's
Into
true.
the Spider-Verse is now part of the Doof canon.
I do want to note that our one dissenting commenter did say that they love the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. So at least he agrees with us on that.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. So welcome to the canon Into the Spider-Verse. Let's get some more movies in there, folks, next month. Thank you to our council for nominating it. If you are a member of our Doof Council, that is the people that are continue to donate to us at the $20 level or higher. That's basically a reward we're giving to those folks for staying, supporting us after we have done their one-off show like we did for Mary this week. So thanks to those people, and keep giving us good movies. I love it.
Yeah.
Can't wait to see what they got for us next
It's
week.
fun to do a foreign film too, like we've talked about.
Sure. Yeah. Let's put some more foreign films up there for the council. Let's do that. That'll be fun. Doof. All right, Matt. Let's talk about Justice League.
Yay.
So to give a little bit of background information before we move into this, we've talked about this on the show before, but we have to assume that maybe someone is not up with the Snyder cut news. So basically, the movie Justice League, which came out, was it 2 years ago or I don't even know, 2 or 3 years ago.
Seems like a long time ago now. Hold on. I want to check this because it's one of those things where 2017.
Yeah. So, okay. So will be 3 years ago this year. Zack Snyder was directing that movie. Then Zack Snyder had a tragedy in his family. So he had to drop out of working on the movie. Joss Whedon stepped up, and Joss Whedon finished the movie and released it. And it was not a good movie. It was bad. It was a bad movie. I actually liked it more than most people did, I think. And that's mostly because I'm like a real sucker for Joss Whedon's type of style of writing. And so the Whedon-y parts really worked on me. Even though I will totally agree the movie's kind of a mess. But I think I liked it more than most people. Anyway, there was a small but very vocal contingent of Zack Snyder fans who felt that the reason the movie was bad was because Zack Snyder did not finish it. And as a matter of fact, believed that there was some mystical cut out there of the film, completed cut, in which Zack Snyder got to make the exact movie he wanted to make without studio meddling, without being replaced by Joss Whedon, who to these people is like just Satan, basically.
Right.
And that this cut would be amazing. It would be the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League, and it would be incredible. It would be his vision. It would be perfect. And they have fought for this. They've fought for the hashtag release the Snyder cut basically since Justice League came out. And we've talked about this before, and my opinion, I was made clear, was that I don't think this cut exists. I don't think this is a real thing. I think if there's anything, it's like an assembly cut that is like just... An assembly cut is like the worst possible thing ever. It's just like the roughest cut where you literally just staple the scenes together in chronological order,
right,
and that's it.
Yeah.
Not viewable in any way, shape, or form. Would make a terrible movie, an awful, awful movie. But these people have said, no, there's the cut, and Zack Snyder has fed into that a little bit. Well, this week, Matt, HBO Max has announced that the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League will be premiering on HBO Max in the year 2021. So what you want to say there is, so you were wrong, Scott. There was a Snyder cut. And my response to that is, no, there wasn't. Because what they're doing now is they're just going to finish the movie. Zack Snyder is going to try to wrangle up every person that was on his post-production team and kind of Frankenstein his own cut of the movie together from some of the old stuff that he shot, from some of the old stuff in the final cut. They're even talking about trying to hire back some of the actors to do ADR work for some stuff. Probably not reshooting scenes because it's been 3 years and these people look different, aka Ben Affleck. But basically, like, it's so funny because like this is the release the Snyder Cut people getting everything they wanted, but also it proves once and for all that this was not a real thing because they're going to take the next year to kind of create this thing.
Yeah. The thing that future generations need to know, though, is that Zack Snyder and others were totally trolling on Twitter. Like Zack Snyder would like release this picture, which was like just like of film canisters that said like, didn't it say like the Snyder cut on the side of the film canisters or something ridiculous like that? It did. Yeah, and you're just you know that he's just doing this to mess with everyone.
Of course.
You have to wonder if these conversations had started before that, and this was sort of like building hype for this idea that like, I really wonder what the history of like whose idea was this in the first place? Because I really doubt that Zack Snyder himself was like, man, I'm so mad at Joss Whedon. I need to go fix the movie. Like I think that maybe somebody noticed like, hey, there's a market for you to just look, the movie's already here. Just hire the people who are going to do the post-production, which is way cheaper, and we'll slap it on HBO and we'll make a cool 100 mil or you know, whatever they say.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what happened is a studio realized they could make money off of this whole thing. They just let Zack Snyder create his own movie. They call it the Snyder Cut, and just the Snyder Cut name brings attention to it, and people will watch it. And I'm going to watch it. Of course I am. I think the last time we talked about this thing, I said to you, I hope it's real. Yeah. I don't think it is, but I hope it's real because I would love to see it. And I can't wait until this thing comes out and is just actually still bad, because that's what's going to happen. It's still going to be bad. Yeah. Because it's not like you can just create a good movie out of the mess that was the old movie. And Matt, what they're talking about doing here, it's either going to be a 4-hour director's cut, or they're going to divide it into 6 miniseries episodes, which is just, it's insane. It's insane to me that this is happening.
I know. The thing is, it's such a boring movie already. like that's the problem with it. Like I'm not. I don't like the movie. I made no secret of that. The problem with it isn't like that Doomsday looks silly or whatever. Wait, which one are we talking about?
No, you're thinking of Steppenwolf. Doomsday is in the Batman versus Superman movie that Zack Snyder did make the whole time, and that one was awful too.
Yeah, the problem isn't that Steppenwolf looks stupid. The problem is that the movie is boring. And you're not going to fix that by making it longer.
No, don't you see? He had a vision. And he needs to be able to complete his vision.
Okay, yeah.
Even though he got to complete his vision for Batman versus Superman, and that was not 2020. He got to complete his vision for Man of Steel, and that was a mess. Like I think Zack Snyder is more interesting than most people give him credit for, and I love the way he sees a lot of things, but I just don't think. The idea that this is suddenly going to be like the most brilliant comic book movie ever made is absurd. It's absurd. It's still going to feel choppy and weird because they're still going to be like assembling this from bits and pieces of the movie. Like it's whatever. I hope I'm going to watch it. We're going to talk about it on the show. Of course we are. In 2021, if we're still alive, then who the hell knows? But it's such a weird time to be alive, Matt, because like you have all these people that are like vindicated that yes, you were wrong, the Snyder Cut exists, and I'm just like, no, it doesn't though. It's going to. They're going to make it. That's what they're doing over the next year. They're going to make the thing you said already exists.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be good for a lot of people to have the experience of believing so strongly that it's going to be amazing and life-changing, and then it's just going to be a movie.
Yeah.
And they're going to be crushed and heartbroken. I think we all need this experience. I mean, I certainly had it. There were movies when I was a kid where I would like look forward to this movie with such unreasonable expectation that no possible movie could have lived up to it. And then when I would see it, I would be just crushed. And then later I would watch it again and be like, oh, actually it was okay. But the point is, this is not going to be, there's no way it's going to be good.
Do you actually believe those people are going to do it though? Because I think this is a weird specimen in pop culture where I think I don't want to call a movie critic proof, but I think like nobody's going to be able to talk anyone into or out of an opinion about this movie. I think the people that were most vocal about wanting this movie are going to love it no matter what. And I think the people that were most vocal about thinking this was a stupid idea are probably going to hate it no matter what. And I'm just going to be in the middle going, but I don't know. I think it's going to be a very interesting thing. I don't know what it looks like. I honestly don't.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like this might be one of those like arguments are never won in real time thing where like they're certain type of person is going to dig their heels in and just be like, no, it was genius. And then you just have to be like, you know what, buddy, you're right. You're totally right. I'm not even, and then you just let them go off and live their life and 5 years later be like, I never liked that movie.
Yeah, sure.
Because that's how this actually goes in real life.
Sure. And then eventually, if you live long enough, things go back around to where people are like, no, actually it was good.
Right.
Which is where we are with the prequels.
Yeah,
right
don't
now.
even remind me.
The prequels are bad, folks. I'm sorry. They're real bad.
This is my new crusade, okay?
Yeah. Here's what I'll leave us with, Matt. What if it's really good? Like, what if it's actually really good? How crazy would that be? Wouldn't that be crazy?
Yeah, I think I'd have to kind of rethink some things, right? That'd be one of those things where you're like, I was so wrong that I have to go into the woods for a while.
I think we'd have to cancel the podcast. I think I can't talk about movies anymore.
Yeah, right.
I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
We'd have to do one of those reinvention things where we're like, after much soul searching and personal growth, like maybe a long break to sort of reconsider things, retool things,
Yeah, we'll turn the Doofcast into one of those those podcasts about movies that do like a minute per episode, like a minute of the movie is an episode of the podcast. We'll just transition the Doofcast to doing that about the Snyder Cut.
Yeah.
And it'll take 5 years because it's going to be like 600 minutes long.
Yeah. It'll be all we do
It'll be all we do. We'll cancel all our other shows,
Yeah.
and we'll just spend our lives minute by minute with the Snyder Cut.
Yeah.
There we go. That's our plan.
Look forward to that, everyone.
Yeah. We'll see you in 2021. Oh my God. What is life? I can't with this.
I know.
Did you see, this is completely random and off the cuff, but do you know that the John Krasinski's like YouTube show that he's been doing called like the Some Good News YouTube thing?
I'm aware that it exists. I haven't watched it at all.
Yeah, so it's basically like during this whole horrible quarantine thing, he's just been like, I want to spread good news to everyone. So he just like started recording this thing in his house that was just him, and it's escalated from there. Like he had someone that was going to get to go see Hamilton, and then of course Broadway was canceled, and so he literally got the entire cast of Hamilton onto a Zoom call to sing to the little girl who didn't get to go see Hamilton, and it's just like gone crazy from there. But today it was announced that CBS All Access has optioned the show, and they're going to make it on CBS. This little silly like YouTube thing that Krasinski did, he sold to CBS.
That's okay. Yeah. Okay.
And he's not going to be on it anymore.
He's not going to. He's just sold. So he just sold. So let me just say this in my own words. Okay. So John Krasinski, the extremely charismatic actor, sold just the concept of a TV show about good news to a network to run as a show, even though it had been a YouTube show prior to that.
Precisely.
And now he can't do the YouTube show anymore, but they are going to do it on television, which no one watches
without him.
Okay, yes. I got it. Yep, I got it.
And
so
he probably made millions of dollars.
He probably did make millions of dollars, so at least I feel good for him. Stories like this do make me excited, though. Excited to know that there is a lot of dumb money out there that is being handed out willy-nilly.
Where can we get some of this dumb money? CBS.
Yeah.
I got an idea for a podcast about the Justice League that watches it a minute at a time.
Right. I'm happy to sell you this idea and not be involved.
Yeah,
fact,
I don't want to actually do it. Give me $1 million so I don't have to do that podcast, please.
Okay.
Oh my God. What is the world? It's crazy.
All right. Okay.
All right. Well,
yep. Good.
That's all we had for you guys this week. If you have any opinions on Breaker Morant, on the Justice League Snyder Cut, on Into the Spider-Verse that you didn't share last week, or on our new podcast idea to watch a minute of Justice League every week for eternity, you can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on our Twitter account at doofmedia.
Yeah, and if you're not already subscribed to this podcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And you can find this and all of our shows over at doofmedia.com. That's where you can find one of our brand new shows called Decomposing Worm. It's a show similar to our We've Got Worm podcast, but a little bit different, that dives into Wild Bill's Worm from some new angles, from some different literary theory angles, some different critical angles. It premieres, if you're listening to this now, it's there, it's out there. So go check it out on doofmedia.com. And if you like what we do here and want to support us, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. Head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia. You can pledge $1 a month or whatever else you can afford to help ensure we keep growing and keep making new content. If we get to 1,000 patrons by the end of this month, we'll do the Justice League show. This episode right here only exists thanks to the wonderful generosity of our patron, Mary F. Thank you, Mary, so much. I really, really loved watching this movie, so thank you for suggesting it for us. It's a treat. This is not a movie I ever would have picked for us to watch. It was not a movie I ever would have said, Matt, let's do a show on this. But that's what I love about these patron-produced episodes, Matt, is that we can kind of stumble our way into experiences that we love, and that's exactly what happened here.
Yep. Couldn't have said it better. Was really glad to get to watch this and appreciate that. Cool.
Yep.
Also, please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts. Every review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
All right, we will all see you next week when we head back into the crazy world of David Fincher to discuss his 2010 award-winning film, The Social Network.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.
Matt, the saddest thing about this is no one's going to hear that amazing last segment of the episode because no one's going to listen to this because nobody's seen Breaker Morant.